Wendy Francis is the National Director of Politics for the Australian Christian Lobby. Thanks for joining us today, Wendy.
You're very welcome. It's good to talk to you, Ricky. Thanks.
Thanks, Wendy. Look, the bill hasn't been cited yet on religious freedom, and it's been a bit tricky for the government to get something through the Parliament. What are you aware of is going to happen on religious freedom in federal Parliament this week?
So our understanding is that it'll be tabled tomorrow, I think they are going to have trouble getting it through, to be honest. But I have had virtual meetings with the AG, so I sort of know some of what's in and some of what's out. But I don't think any of the interest groups have actually seen the bill yet. It's going to be a big week in politics, I can tell you that.
So the religious freedom debate, I mean, it's taking the headlines. Federal politicians are speaking about it on national television today. Why is it a thing? Why is it important to legislate something to protect religious freedom?
Well, really, it goes back to the plebiscite on marriage. I think it goes right back to that, because when that happened and when the vote was to change the definition of marriage, some of what people of religion or people of faith believe in their, as part of their ethos of what they have faith in, some of that actually became no longer part of the law of Australia. So some of what I believe as a Christian is no longer what is legally acceptable in Australia. So we needed protection. So that's really breaking it down to someone like me who is not a lawyer. But that's really some of what I believe in my heart. So I still believe that marriage is between one man and one woman for life. That's my belief, and I believe that because I read that in the Bible. So and I'm allowed to say that in Australia because we have some protections over religion. But that is becoming harder and harder when you get into the employment. When you get into a job or when you get into any area that you're going to potentially offend somebody by saying that, then we need protections for religious people.
Now, this is something that's of concern to yourself as a Christian and from the Australian Christian Lobby point of view, but I gather it's other faith groups would hold similar views based on their religious texts, and indeed I think Federal Labor acknowledged after the last election that maybe alienated some of those groups as an error of why they lost the election.
Absolutely. And so I've been in meetings with the heads of churches around Australia, and included in them are imams from the Islam community. I've been in them when there's been people from the Buddhist community. So this is definitely something that doesn't just affect Christians. And I'd make the point, I think, Ricky, that still in Australia, the majority of people hold religious beliefs. So we're not just talking about the Christian faith here. We're talking about Australians who hold religious beliefs, and the majority do.
Now, there's state laws that in various states purport to protect religious freedom. Why do we need federal laws if there are state laws that look after this sort of thing?
So New South Wales don't have, I think they're the only state or territory that don't. But the problem is that some of the state laws are actually overstepping the mark and making it more difficult for religious people. So particularly in Victoria now, we have laws that would make it almost impossible for a Christian school, for instance, or a Islamic school to decide that they were going to choose somebody to work there because of their faith. So it's not that they're not qualified. So certainly Christian school wants the highest qualified person, but they also want to be able to choose somebody who is going to adhere to the Christian faith. That's what they want. But in Victoria, for instance, now, that is actually overridden for religious schools. So what we need is a federal bill that will say, no, look, there are some basic rights for every Australian, and this is a basic right for organisations.
So is a federal law going to override a Victorian law in that case? How's that clash going to be resolved between which law is going to be upheld in the courts?
So this is one of the big things that we were really wanting to see in this bill, and I think to a very low level it has been addressed, but certainly so I think from my understanding the word is going to be prefer. So Christian schools or an Islamic school or even a hospital prefer somebody of faith. So it depends again on, I suppose, the interpretation of some of this wording, but the federal government does want to address this obvious problem in states.
There's been a few opinion pieces published recently indicating that there's concern that maybe no bill would be better than the bill that's being proposed. Is it sort of one of these ugly compromises that could end up backfiring and doing worse things for religious freedom?
I hope not. I really hope not. And I understand why people would say that, but I do think that we need a start, and this bill is a start. It's not the end of the conversation, and I would be hoping that as we look to 2022 and the federal election, that we can still talk more about this, and there will be further consultation, and particularly further consultation in the Senate. And we will certainly be making further recommendations for improvement. And the bill, I do think the bill is going to be unremarkable in one way, in providing, but it will provide some basic protections. It doesn't address some of the flashpoints, for religious hostility, because we're seeing that in the real world. There is overreach of employers into employees' private speech. There is the misuse of hate speech laws against religious expression. There are threats to churches and families from the so-called conversion therapy laws, when you can't even pray for somebody without being caught under that. And there is increasing attacks on the ability for Christian schools to operate according to their ethos. So all of this is really happening, and in one way, the bill is not going to actually fix all of that, but it is a start, and it will provide some basic protections. And for my part, I want to see it pass. I really do, because I want to see something there.
Now, the federal parliament will not last for much longer, and then they'll have to have an election. Now, this religious freedom issue was a pledge the Morrison government made before the last election. Is the ACL disappointed that we're not really going to see anything likely pass before the federal election?
Very disappointed. We really are. And it's not just us. We represent close to 300,000 supporters, and we are really disappointed. I understand that COVID has sort of come in the way of a lot of stuff getting through the Parliament. I totally get that. But when the government wants to get something through, they can get it through pretty quickly. So I think it is disappointing. I think it is representative of the way that there is turmoil even within the coalition. I don't think, we're not going to see every coalition member want to support this bill either. So it's just indicative of a party that is not totally committed to religious freedom.
Wendy Francis, the National Director of Politics for the Australian Christian Lobby, thanks for joining us today on Flow.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.